And with that, I'm going to introduce the moderator for our next panel. I'm very pleased to introduce George Calderero, HCC Director.
Hi, good morning. I'm happy and honored to be moderating a panel, Preserving Culture. We'll discuss how can communities preserve their intangible heritage that contributes to the sense of place. 3 panelists will discuss how they're doing this, both through community collaboration and government regulation. I'll just briefly, there are extensive bios in your packet, but I'll just briefly say our panelists are Natalie Milbrodt, Director of the Queen's Memory Project, who will share the Queen's Name Explorer, a growing archive of the borough's places and sites named after individuals. Grace Lee, Senior Community Development Specialist and Cultural Districts Manager for the City of San Francisco, will be joining us remotely to discuss how the Cultural Districts Program works to celebrate, preserve, and strengthen cultural assets and traditions. And finally, Ramona Hernandez is Director of CUNY's Dominican Studies Institute and Professor of Sociology at City College, who will present her work towards the creation of a Dominican Historic District listed on the National Register of Historic Places. So we will start with Natalie, please.
Good morning. Greetings from the world's borough. My name is Natalie Milbrodt, and I'm very happy to be with you here today. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm excited to tell you a little bit about a new initiative that we started last year. But first, a little bit about what Queen's Memory is. It's a community-driven, mostly oral history project, but a community archiving program that's supported by Queens Public Library and also by Queens College CUNY. We have a collection of about 1,000 interviews, and we were founded in 2010. And we do lots of public history events. So sometimes those things are, author talks or panel discussions, but more often they're things like scanning days where we invite people to bring things from home and we give them some help, some advice about how to keep their materials safe and stored in a good way. And then we also digitize them and send them home with digital backups. So we try to enable people to be their own archivists and archivists for their families and for their friends and community members, and then keep their digital versions of their records. And then also all of the information they can tell us about them. So if it's a photograph, we're capturing, the year it was taken and who's in the photo, as much information as we can get for future researchers, and then adding that to our collections. So we really try to maintain good, solid relationships with community members and come back to people again and again, and engage them in programming and all kinds of archival work that they're interested in doing. But today I'm here to talk about the Queen's Name Explorer, which is an interactive map of Queens that is built in the Urban Archive platform that has every place that is named after an individual person in Queens. So the idea behind this is that we have many place names that people are not familiar with who this person is. And a lot of the place names are actually things that have been maybe named like honorary street names. Those are about half of our entries. And they're often people who are extremely important to our local communities, but not necessarily people who are nationally known. And so what we know is that in a generation or two, we might not have great ways to learn about who these folks were and what their contributions were to their neighborhoods and to their communities. So we're trying to capture, because we're mostly an oral history program, we're trying to capture people's living memory of the people in our named places. And so we're reaching out to family members and friends, people who knew the people who are named, and asking them for their photographs and for their memories. And we're bringing that all together in one place. So this is a zoom in on the map that's on the Urban Archives website. And we found from an initial dig into public data, this started as kind of a civic tech project where we were just taking databases that are freely, or data sets that are freely available through the city and bringing them all together in one place, was that there were about 1,300 places that are named after individuals in the borough. And so far we have 1,048 of them live on the site. This is the way the site looks. I'm not going to try to do a live demo for you today. It's a little too wonky, but there are a couple of features of the site that I'd like to draw your attention to. One, in the top right corner, there's an add edit button. So that is what people can use if they see an entry for someone in one of these named places that they, maybe have a photograph of that person or have some knowledge or a story about them, they can add it. They can also identify places that they know in their own neighborhoods that are named places that have not made it onto this map yet. And I'm expecting to find many more of those. We've gotten some really nice engagements from the public. Mostly, we've heard from people who are surviving family members who have provided really beautiful memorials for their loved ones and given us really nice photographs. In the bottom right corner, you'll see that there are sliders, and the first one is for community board districts. The next one is for neighborhoods. And the third one is for city council districts. So when you activate one of those sliders, it produces an overlay that shows you the boundaries of community board districts or neighborhoods or city council districts. And the reason we did this is that we know that community boards and city council offices are very involved with naming. And we wanted them to very easily be able to see what name places were in their districts and be able to engage people who are involved in these groups. And then on the left is a listing of all of the entries. And if you zoom in on any part of the map and you hit that button in the top that says search this area, it will show a new set of entries that are just for that area. So you can zoom way in. You can also filter so that you're just seeing schools or you're just seeing parks. So you can tell that there are different icons here that represent the different types of things. So far we have streets, schools, parks, buildings, monuments, and markers. So markers are just where there's like a sign, but no building or anything. So most of the database is streets because there are so many honorary street names. I wanted to show you an example. This was actually a place name that I had in mind when we very first started speaking with our friends at Urban Archive about this project. There's a street that's called Mama's Way. It was named in 2009 after a beloved restaurant owner who her full name was Nancy de Benedictis, but all of the people in the neighborhood just knew her as Mama, and especially the kids. They really loved her. And so there are generations of kids that came up and all called her Mama. And so they wanted to name the street after her. And I remember being really charmed when I heard about this story in 2009, but also being a little concerned that we were going to lose track of who this woman was in, again, like a generation or two. Like I thought in 100 years, is anybody going to know who Mama was? And so we have been able to hear from the family, and we have some beautiful pictures of her. And we have a more extended story about her family's business and about, the ways that they were integrated into the community and really involved. So talking a little bit about some of the programming and outreach that we've done since putting the site up. We've definitely engaged in walking tours, and what's been really fun is working with experienced walking tour guides who kind of have like their own guides for different neighborhoods that they've established, and working with them to kind of insert some of these name places that normally they would just breeze past, but have those become part of their tour and have those people's stories become part of the narrative that they share with people as they're doing a tour. So the one that's coming up next is we're doing 2 in Elmhurst with Linda Fisher, who's a really amazing tour guide. So we're looking forward to that. That's on Saturday, the 10th of June, and then the following Saturday, the 17th. We've also had a speaker series featuring some authors like Joshua Jodley Shapiro and Rebecca Bratspees, who have both written recent books about name places in New York City. And they've offered some really interesting stories behind name places. And then we've also had talks with people like Jason Antos, who is the executive director of the Queens Historical Society, who shares how-to information as well as information about the name places. And so we're really trying to be an information source as a library for people who are interested in figuring out how to get something named and learning about how that process works. We've done a lot of social media outreach, and we've also engaged within our library's themed outreach campaigns, usually around month of kind of campaigns. So for example, during Women's History Month, we were able to create little curated groups of entries and then publish them and share them out on social media. So we're able to draw from this 1,300 group of 1,300 extraordinary people and make different collections for different things that we're celebrating. So for example, we had a women's history spotlight on educators. And so we had a whole collection of entries that were just about female educators who had been honored with place names in Queens. We've also opened up the opportunity to have damage reports, which a couple people have taken us up on. So if there are any signs that are missing or named places that are damaged in any way, there's a way through our add and edit form that you can just let us know about that. And then we pass it along to our government affairs office at the library, who then reaches out to the appropriate contact. So I think that they've reached out to so far just Department of Transportation, but they also have contacts, of course, at the Parks Department and other entities that might be involved to be able to, let them know that there is damage and try to get that repaired. We also have done, of course, outreach to community boards and city council members through newsletter blurbs that we've written up with an example of a really well-developed entry, and then one that is like kind of a mystery spot that we're looking for more information about. And then we also have done outreach to schools and students. So mostly outreach to people who are in public schools that are named after individuals, asking them what they might know about those folks. And so as far as future phases go, we, of course, are going to continue building out the existing entries and then finding additional entries to add to the map. And then as we begin to get more complete information about these folks, we're really excited to do some demographic analysis. And that was part of the reason why we had the outlines that were about community board districts and also city council districts, because we know that we have demographic like census information about populations in those areas, so that we'll be able to do a comparison between a group of people who are named place people and in comparison with the population that's living in that neighborhood now. And because Queens is so rapidly changing all the time, and because most of our population and the kind of explosion of diversity that makes us a very special place has really happened kind of since the 1960s mostly, we know that there are going to be some kind of mismatches, and we're excited to let communities know about that and then maybe inspire them to nominate new folks to have name places. We're also going to be experimenting with a kiosk that's a physical kiosk in our central library that will have this map and just be able to show some local oral histories and then also some local name places that are in the vicinity of the library. So we'll be piloting that with our friends at Wikimedia NYC and trying to see how that works. So that's something that's coming up on the horizon. And lastly, I'll just mention that we had this really wonderful collaboration that is just wrapping up because the semester is coming to an end with CUNY journalism students. And they all decided to do some reporting and look up people who would have stories and information about name place people in Corona, Queens. And they did these beautiful interviews that will all then become part of our collections, but they're also these great pieces for them that are portfolio pieces for, for all of the students. And we're hoping that they might be published on WNYC. So fingers crossed there. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I'll be around. Thank you.
And do we have Grace in San Francisco on the line?
I'm here. Can you hear me? I'm not sure if you can see me.
We can hear you. We can't see.
No.
We see little you. Mini.
That's fine. I'm glad I'm not big.
Okay.
I can go ahead and share my
We're-
screen.
I see people working on keyboards back there. So can we make Grace full screen? And again, this is Grace Jiyun Lee, Senior Community Development Specialist and Cultural Districts Manager for the City of San Francisco, who woke up very early on a Saturday, I assume, to join us. So thank you, Grace.
No problem. I wish I were there in person. All right, so can I go ahead and start sharing my screen? Let's see if it works for you all.
You can go ahead and share it. Here we go. Oh, there it is. Okay, great.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. Good morning, everyone. I'm Grace Lee. I'm the Cultural Districts Program Manager at the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development in San Francisco. And thank you so much for having me. I'm going to give you a brief overview of our Cultural Districts program and then provide some ways that these districts are working to preserve and celebrate their distinctive cultural heritages. The Cultural Districts program was established by the San Francisco Board of Supervisors back in May 2018 as a direct response to the rapid gentrification that's been happening and the recognition that it is the city's diversity and distinct cultural groups that are part of what make the city so special. The program is a placemaking and placekeeping initiative, and its vision is to preserve, strengthen, and promote cultural communities by supporting residents, legacy businesses, nonprofits, community arts, social practices, and traditions. And the districts focus on specific cultural communities and ethnic groups that have been historically discriminated against, displaced, and oppressed. And in November 2018, voters passed Proposition E by 75%, which means that there is a dedicated funding source for cultural districts. And the program also formalizes a collaborative partnership between the city and communities and brings resources to stabilize these groups at risk of displacement. So what is a cultural district? The program's founding legislation defines it as a designated geographic area that embodies a unique cultural heritage, meaning that these locations contain a concentration of cultural and historic assets, culturally significant enterprise, arts, services, and or businesses. And additionally, a significant portion of the residents or people who spend time in the area are members of a specific cultural community or ethnic group. There are currently 10 formally recognized cultural districts located across San Francisco: Japantown Cultural District, Calle 24 Latino Cultural District in the Mission, Soma Filipinas Filipino Cultural District, Transgender Cultural District, which is in the Tenderloin, the Leather and LGBTQ Cultural District, African American Arts and Cultural District out in the Bayview, Castro LGBTQ Cultural District, American Indian Cultural District, Sunset Chinese, and Pacific Islander Cultural District, which is the newest district that was just passed by the board last year. And though the Cultural Districts program was formally established just in 2018, we recognize that many communities were doing important cultural heritage preservation and stabilization work well before that date, both in a formal and informal capacity. So one thing that makes this program unique is specifically how the program was designed, very much as a partnership between community and city. So each cultural district has an advisory board made up of members of the cultural community who provide leadership and guidance and help set the vision for the district. And the community provides input and feedback on their needs and potential solutions and day-to-day activities, and making progress on the community's vision is carried out by staff. And then the staff also work closely with an interdepartmental steering committee to achieve their shared vision. The program is coordinated by our office, the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, and I work in collaboration with 3 other departments that we consider the steering committee: the Arts Commission, San Francisco Planning, and the Office of Economic and Workforce Development. and each department shares resources and expertise in their respective fields to support realization of each of those communities' priorities. So the cultural districts serve really as community connectors and conveners. And as part of their work, each district is required to complete what we call a CHESS report. And CHESS stands for Cultural History, Housing, and Economic Sustainability Strategies. And it's designed to serve as a strategic plan that provides a roadmap for community stabilization. There's two main parts to each CHESS report: a history and cultural legacy statement, which provides context and history about the community, as well as a set of strategies for community stabilization. And the strategies are developed through a robust community engagement process with constituents who live, work, and frequent the district, and with coordination, of course, from the city departments to ensure feasibility and alignment. The strategies that each of the districts work on focus primarily on 6 policy areas. There's cultural heritage preservation, which looks into preserving and maintaining the unique cultural and historic assets, traditions, and arts and character of each district. Housing and tenant protections, meaning working to stop displacement of residents from the districts and promoting affordable housing opportunities. Arts and culture, supporting artists and cultural enterprises who embody and promote the unique heritage of each district. Economic and workforce development, meaning promoting economic opportunities for residents and businesses in the district. Land use, creating appropriate land use controls and zoning regulations that promote and protect businesses and industries. And cultural competency, so promoting culturally appropriate services, programs, and outreach in the service of social equity. I've listed on the right the different city departments on the steering committee who lend their input and expertise in each of these areas. And I just want to note that this is not an exhaustive list of the departments who might work on this process. Sometimes we work with SFMTA around like street signage and permitting, or the Department of Public Health and other folks. So I just want to provide a brief sampling of the types of economic and cultural stabilization and preservation activities that some of our cultural districts are engaged in. On the left, you see a flyer. This is a joint program between Calle 24, the Latino Cultural District, and the American Indian Cultural District. They co-organize a program called Calle Limpia, Corazón Contento, that activates a commercial corridor in the mission. And part of that revitalization effort seeks to legitimize local street vendors and offer them a pathway to small business ownership. In the middle, there's a photo of a mural in the African American Arts and Cultural District. So many of the districts use arts and culture to activate public spaces in ways that celebrate the neighborhood's cultural community and highlights local artists. In the center bottom is a photo of the Castro Theater. So the Castro LGBTQ district has taken a leadership role in efforts to landmark the interior of the historic Castro Theater, a significant site and cultural space for the community. And on the right, one of the ways that the district's increased cultural competency can be seen through Soma Pilipinas' work of strengthening and increasing language access for Filipino residents. So these examples highlight activities that the districts address in their CHESS process as they're engaging with the community. And today I want to specifically highlight some of the work of the American Indian Cultural District as we think about how communities can preserve their intangible heritage. San Francisco is home to one of the largest urban Native populations in the US, and the American Indian Cultural District, AICD, is dedicated to recognizing, honoring, and celebrating the American Indian legacy, people and their contributions. So, some folks might think of American Indians as a relic of the past, but they are very much still here and oftentimes have been grossly underserved. So some stark San Francisco statistics are that The American Indian, Alaska Native population faces the highest rate of unemployment in the city. They have the second lowest median income in the city. They have the lowest home ownership rates in the city, and 25% face housing insecurity. So some of the work that AICD does is to advocate and increase visibility. I'm gonna talk about just a few of their major milestones. So one is partnering with the planning department to make sure their housing needs and cultural land use is highlighted in the housing element, which now includes over 100 mentions of American Indians, and previously I think just had 1 or 2. They collaborate with other Native organizations in the Office of Racial Equity to help identify issues around the history of exclusion and accuracy of American Indian data. Working with the Board of Supervisors to pass a resolution recognizing November as National Native American Heritage Month. And they've partnered with the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone on a land acknowledgement resolution with the San Francisco Rights Commission, recognizing San Francisco as on Ramaytush Ohlone land. And this was later adopted by many of the city agencies across San Francisco. In addition to their advocacy work, one of AICD's ongoing initiatives is called the Indigenize Project, which creates an interactive experience to confront systemic erasure and increase public awareness of local Native culture and history. So one of the things that they do is work with Indigenous artists to develop a multi-part mural project throughout San Francisco, focus on honoring California Indians and the diverse Indigenous communities of the San Francisco Bay Area. They've partnered with the MTA and Mayor's Office to place street signs throughout the cultural districts and along the main corridors. And they work with local and California American Indian artists to develop flagpole honors that honor the cultural heritage to line the streets of their home base in the Mission. And the American Indian Cultural District corridor is located in the Mission neighborhood, an area that holds historical and cultural significance to the American Indian community because of the concentration of historic events, cultural resources, Native programming, and gathering spaces that were both historically and are presently important to the community. So branching out from this home base, the one piece of the Indigenize project maps out works of art and educational destinations throughout the city via QR code to create a cultural trail for people to learn and experience American Indian culture and history through an Indigenous lens. And through their ongoing genocide mapping project, the team is researching place names in the city. So streets, monuments, parks, statues that honor those who contributed to the genocide of American Indians with the aim to educate and bring truth to the history of the city's practices of honoring those who have contributed to genocide, and bring healing through a community-based process to bring in culturally relevant works of art and place names. And a current effort is to rename a portion of Mission Dolores Park to Chuchuy, which is the name of the village prior to the arrival of Spanish missionaries. And that is the presentation. And if folks have want more information, there is a link to our website and my email address. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Grace. Next, we have again Ramona Hernandez, Director of CUNY's Dominican Studies Institute and Professor of Sociology at City College. And have slides momentarily.
I need to thank you for having me here, and I apologize for the delay beginning my presentation. Thank you, Diego Roballo, for recommending my name for this wonderful conference. I send this to the technical people, to Diego and the rest, I think about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and then I kept working. This is why they were not prepared. It's totally my fault. So I take a responsibility for that. Let me see how I, okay, I think I can move this. This presentation focuses on the proposition or a designation of a Dominican Historic District and the to be listed in the National Register of Historic Places. And I think I'm going to begin with some demographic data, so that it may that I think it makes sense to you what we are trying to do. This represents 3 moments. I'm trying to see the times here. 3 moments in the okay, okay. On Dominican migration to the US, the first one is 1613 with the arrival of Juan Rodriguez. So this is why you see 1. And the second one is the representation of the, I think, right? Oh, no, wait a minute. The representation of people who came, Dominicans actually, who came through Ellis Island, a little bit more than 5,000. And this is sort of like a very, it's not a known history whatsoever. And we are documenting this as we speak. And the large ball, this is the way that I could represent this, represents Dominican migration coming to the US from 1966 approximately and continue to today. So this is an exercise that I did, and that was comparing the arrival of Dominicans coming through Ellis Island and the arrival of immigrants coming through Ellis Island. I wanted to see whether they match. And the reason why I did this is because we are utilizing migration as a significant moment in the history of the US. And this is, you need to show that kind of significance in the stuff that you are proposing. And what is interesting about this graph is that it looks like Dominicans came from the Dominican Republic to the US exactly in the same kinds of way the rest of the immigrants who came from Europe. At this time, the overwhelming majority of people that were coming here, they came from Europe, and it was sort of like a discovery to find so many Dominicans at that time. That migration, of course, created permanent settlement. And this is part of the settlement process is also this naturalization that we see, and one interesting thing that we see is that the longer Dominican live here, the higher their proportion of becoming naturalized. This is another symbol of settlement. It represents in 3 different dates people of Dominican ancestry who are immigrant and people who Dominican ancestry who are now being born in the US. And what you see is that progressively and aggressively, the second generation, as those who are born here are called, are kind of taking over the immigrant population. And that, of course, made us think, and actually Grace was fantastic in her presentation, in indicating the desire of people to preserve a history, to preserve a culture. And how did you do that when you have this particular phenomenon here taking place? And this is an interesting graph. At the Dominican Studies Institute, we don't stop thinking. We think all the possibilities. And this looks at the birth of people in the different states where they are located. And what you can see here is that in the majority of the places where they are, you have this overwhelming growth in a sense of women as compared to babies that are boys, Dominican boys. And as a consequence, we laugh with this because, the blue one is a Dominican male and the other one, this is a very traditional portrait. And the one that are running behind are Dominican women. And so if you want one of those, you have to really go fast. It's a traditional portrait of this. So here we are. So now this takes me to, with this little bit of the demographic in your mind, it takes me to Washington Heights, the focus of my presentation. That is a neighborhood that has been transformed by the Dominican people. I think I want to read now a little, and then I want to go into the map. Let me see. No, I still have a couple of more graphs. This is an interesting graph of Washington Heights. It again is historic. It's 1960 to the year 2000. And what you see there is the population of Washington Heights, which is the blue one. And the orange one is the Dominican population. And progressively, you see how the Dominican population has grown enormously to the point that in 2020, more than one person in two residing in Washington Heights was of Dominican descent. And now it has sort of like a stabilized, it's 48%. So meaning that almost 1 in 2 people that resides in Washington Heights, it's of Dominican ancestry. So it is an overwhelming presence and it has consistently grown. And again, here you have the descending Dominican population in Washington Heights compared to Dominican population in Manhattan. And in 2020, it was, the rest of the Dominican people who live in Manhattan is very small as compared to Washington Heights. They are concentrated. When we look at them and compare them with other Latino groups or any other group, they have the highest concentration per Black, right? Which is the smallest geographic measurement than any other group in Washington Heights, I should say. And I think I want to finish with that one because this one, okay, that's the interactive map. Let me read it now to justify this proposal. Okay. Washington Heights has long been the cultural heartland of the Dominican community in New York City, and more broadly, the United States. Since the 1960s, the neighborhood has been a hub for Dominican activities, bustling with the combined sounds of Spanish business transactions alongside soft merengue music in the background, complementing the well-intonated voices of street vendors, calling and hoping to catch the attention of possible customers as they move on the streets with Dominican goods. From a stroll through the Upper Manhattan neighborhood, the effort Dominicans had made to carve out a space for themselves and mark their presence is evident. The storefront claim their Dominican origins with names like Quisqueya and Santo Domingo. Dominican flags adorn many of their streets, displaying a non-timid presence. And on cool nights, Dominicans of all ages energize the streets alongside their friends and neighbors of other ethnic backgrounds by sitting outside and chatting and playing dominoes, all while keeping their bodies in tune with the delightful rhythms of merengue and bachata. In recognition of Dominicans' long-standing historical presence and an impressive list of concrete contributions to the life of Washington Heights, the CUNY Dominican Studies Institute seeks to designate a portion of Washington Heights as a Dominican Historic District in the U.S. National Register of Historic Places. Such a designation would acknowledge the following: that Dominicans moved into Washington Heights when others fled and felt that they could not raise their children there, joining forces with residents who saw value and stayed put. The Dominicans decided to rebuild alongside others the reputation of Washington Heights with their work ethic, their vision, and their values. The Dominicans created a booming economy with the establishment and expansion of small businesses that decisively increased the city's coffers with tax contribution, while also creating jobs and creating the aggregate value of the neighborhood. The Washington Heights social fabric was impregnated with a distinct, vibrant Dominican culture and historical legacy, supported by an impressive number of homegrown community organizations and businesses. That the arrival and settlement of the Dominican people to New York City occurred during pivotal moment of US history. I will mention just two: migration and world wars, starting with Juan Rodriguez, who was the first immigrant to settle in New York City, opened a path for other migrants to come, and whose history intertwines nicely with the history of the rest of the immigrants who came a little later and developed New York City and the entire nation. Also, the enlisting of young Dominican men and women, in the army to fight on behalf of the US in both World War I and World War II. That was a discovery, finding women, Dominican women that early in the army. To support the proposal, CUNY DSI has prepared an interactive digital map that shows a high level of incidence of things Dominican within Washington Heights. The geographic boundaries of the proposed historic district had been designed taking into account longevity, and that Dominican had indeed resided in the proposed district for over 50 years, as required by the US National Register of Historic Places. The demarcated area also take into account Dominicans' material visibility in Washington Heights, leading to a composite whose proportion contains Black by Black more things Dominican than any other area in Washington Heights or any other Dominican neighborhood in the United States for that matter. The borders of the proposed Dominican Historic District in Washington Heights extend from south to north, from 155th Street to Diamond Street, 200, and from east to west, from the Harlem River Drive Parkway to Riverside Drive, stopping at 169th Street, crossing over Broadway. And there are approximately 45 blocks in this proposed district. Let's see if I can show you the map, and we're almost there, right? Okay. Here we are. Okay, wait. I don't know how to make it bigger here. It's, this map provides information on a variety of markers that document the presence, action, and contributions of people of Dominican descent in Washington Heights. In particular, they provide a narrative of what exactly Dominicans perceive as worthy of their attention, as well as what they value and how they value it. The events and sites included here mark trajectories and reveal actions taken with a clear intention to preserve a memory and celebrate a cultural legacy. These markers represent turning points. They have become traditions, occasions repeated from place to place and preserved physically, orally, or in the abstract. They are transmitted and passed on from parents to children, from one Dominican to another, and from Dominican to others. Among the most notable Dominican representations in the map are the iconic Juan Rodriguez Boulevard, a street named after the Dominican who settled in New York City, a cluster of buildings where Dominicans who came through the famous Portobello Ellis Island resided. Casa Dominicana, an organization created in 1954 to do politics against Dictador Rafael Trujillo. The apartment buildings where the nationally recognized singing trio, the Malagon Sisters, lived, who appear in the Sullivan Show. and the 6 public schools that had been named after Dominican historical figures. And of course, if you click on the map, and I end with this, at this point, this map contains 75 markers. There are more, but this is an old map, and you can click, and when you click, you find a definition of what it is, the history of what that is, when it was created, and it goes from one to the other, from churches to streets, to parks, to buses, to businesses, to community-based organizations, and it goes on and on and on and on. And it is impressive because they are really in a small radio, and you have that enormous amount of symbols. And I thank you. I conclude with this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have time for 2 short questions, if there are any. And I'm not sure if Grace is still here. I don't think she is. But if anyone's got questions for Natalie or Ramona. I'll get, oh wait, there's one, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
As far as I understand, the landmarks will take us to specific structures. And this is the problem we have. The overwhelming majority, 99.9% of the structures, the physical structures that you have in Washington Heights are not owned by Dominicans, they're owned by someone else. So this proposal is basically, is based on cultural legacy and historical legacy of a people that is there, but they don't necessarily own the spaces where they are. The landmark status, I think, will create, let's say that we own one building and we wanted to declare that one as a landmark because the Malagon sister live there, and I tell you, we don't own it. It's complicated because once it has that status, you can't touch that property. It's very, very complicated to do anything to that property. And people face a lot of rejection when they are seeking landmark status. And it's usually also for something smaller than a neighborhood or a portion of a neighborhood. But it's a good suggestion.
Sir with the red sweater.
No, these are, and thank you for asking that question. They are now, I think, between 10 and 11 schools in the US named after, in honor of Dominican people in the US. And 6 of those are specifically in Washington Heights. The rest, some of them are in New York, and one in Florida and one in New Jersey. No, these are specific schools we named after Dominican, specifically, not the George Washington. Yes. Yeah.
And I'm wondering what's going on if anything as graduates of the public.
And I'm so grateful that you acknowledge the presence of Dominican children in that school, who many now are important people. But imagine the majority of the schools, actually the 6 schools that we have in Washington Heights, are brand new. They were constructed specifically in the neighborhood, so they were not there. So we find right now some hesitation and some questioning for proposing this. Imagine if we take a school that already has a name and claim it as our, simply because for the last 40 years, the only thing that you find there, it's Dominican kids. It's the truth. It's a reality. It's concrete. And I deal with numbers. You know, these are not, I can tell you stories if you want, you know, story like his story, but I yeah. Yes, sir. Yes.
Several famous things. So it's
Okay.
a historic site for a number of reasons, including advances of the
We will have to continue the conversation during our shortened break, and I could take one more quick question. Pam, is that you? No, you go ahead. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I'm glad you asked that question. Thank you. There are approximately 90,000 listing in the National Historic Register. And of those, only 35 happen to be, 90,000, 35 happen to be Latino in general in the entire country. And this will be, of course, the first Dominican. So this will add to the diversity, hopefully, of the register.
You're very eager, so I'll, one quick code. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Is,
No,
Have the buildings been found eligible,
No.
and will they be eligible for tax
no,
credits?
it is, we have been in discussion for now 2 years. They have reviewed the proposal and they have asked us to do other things. And, you know, I'm patient. I'm a researcher, and it's a whole community that is behind this. So if I die, somebody else will take the project along. That's how I see it. Somebody will get tired, it's not us. No, we are at the stage of completing